Just like tales spun from a cliché web novel, our hero, Eren, wakes up one day and finds himself in a medieval fantasy world. A world ridden with wars fought by knights mounting horses and gladiators wielding swords of every size. Unfortunately, he has no idea how he arrived at such a place and had to become a mercenary just to survive. Eren jumps as he attacks a hunky opponent under the pouring rain, easily cutting him down. Being a mercenary, he has no choice but to continue cutting down opponent after opponent, all in a bid to stay alive. Our hero successfully stabs his next target in the chest, but gets the surprise of his life when he realizes that this opponent is grabbing his sword even though his hands are bleeding because of it. Almost immediately, an even bigger ally of Eren's enemy appears behind him, screaming as he brings down an axe on our hero. Just when he thought he was done for, his deputy commander rides in on horseback and slashes the enemy, thus saving his life. She then yells at him to stay focused, adding that he'll be dead in the blink of an eye otherwise. She goes on to lift her bloodied sword above her head and announce to the hearing of her men that they shouldn't let their guard down for even a moment on the battlefield. With this, she instructs her subordinate to blow the trumpet, and he obeys right away. The moment he blows it, the deputy commander screams at all her forces to charge into battle. They all ride in on horseback, raising dust and spilling blood like it's second nature. In all of this, what our hero wants in this twisted world is to survive. After the battle, he sits on a nearby rock, takes off his helmet, and just basks in the sunlight. The redhead then approaches him, pointing out that he survived once again. Upon seeing her, he gets on his feet and she cups his face in a bid to check for injuries. They go on to touch their foreheads against each other in an emotional moment, with the redhead claiming that she just wanted to make sure that nothing happened to our hero's handsome face. Even with the sun high in the sky, it begins to rain, thus surprising Eren. The deputy, on the other hand, puts out her palm to get a feel of it, and tells our MC that it's all good. She calls his name softly after this, and reveals that she loves the rain. The lady would even like for them to head east after the war is over, seeing as it rains a lot there. Anyway, it soon becomes obvious that our hero has been in his mind this whole time, reminiscing on the time he spent with his beloved on the battlefield and outside it. He gently puts out his palm to feel the rain and just stares into nothingness as he remembers her plea for him not to forget her. Tears begin to gather in his eyes soon enough, and the only thing he can say is that it's raining so heavily. Eren's emotional moment gets disrupted when a guard blows his whistle and directs his colleagues on where to go, cursing at them and adding that they should run. Apparently, he needs them to catch some criminals before they escape the castle. After this, two men, Vermin and Kale, approach our hero, referring to him as their captain. They have to call out to him twice before he turns to face their direction. He acknowledges their presence and then asks about their colleagues. In turn, Vermin tells him that they'll arrive soon. He goes on about how no one would have thought Hans would cause such a big accident. Apparently, this Hans person was a gentle member of their team. Kale then adds that he always thought of him as a pain in the ass and scrounges his face as he reiterates that mages like Hans shouldn't be trusted in the first place. This guard thinks the mage must have made some kind of pact with a demon, and Captain Eren gives this a second thought. He keeps his words to himself though, and just watches as his subordinate mocks his colleague about being jealous because he lost the nickname Handsome to Hans. In turn, Kale curses loudly and denies such a thing ever happening. Unfortunately, his friend uses this as a yardstick to tell him that he was never handsome in the first place. Kale only curses some more, making their captain so tired of their shenanigans that he begins to walk away. Both guards take a break from their fight to know where our hero is heading to, so he tells them that he's returning to headquarters. They silently accept it and go back to their conversation, with Vermin telling his colleague that Hans' nickname will change moving forward. Eren just watches the two guards who were fighting mere moments ago, now laughing as they mock the rogue mage together. His expression remains as stoic as ever, but he keeps in mind that Hans will probably be hanged when they catch him. True to his words, he arrives at the Casertic Outer Fortress headquarters amidst the still pouring rain. Upon entry, he knocks on the door to his boss's chambers and steps in almost immediately. Guard Commander Manuel tells him that he came by a bit late, so Eren blames it on the fact that he fell into a deep sleep. The commander lets it slide as he brings up our hero's close relationship with their wanted criminal and stares at him as he asks if it's true. In turn, he only admits to himself that it's true to an extent. Apparently, Hans was an unusually intelligent boy from an early age, and the youngster had happily approached our hero to tell him about gaining admission into the Magic Academy. They stayed close even after he entered the academy, but Eren realizes how complicated things will become if he tells the commander about the nature of their relationship. For this reason, he tells the man that they were not close, claiming that they barely exchanged greetings as they walked past each other. In response, Commander Manuel quips that it's quite fortunate, and this makes Eren perk up. It turns out that Hans' crime is in relation to the Lord's daughter, seeing as he stole something from her that shouldn't be stolen. The unusually short commander walks up to our hero, taps him by the hand, and asks him if he doesn't think it will please the Lord if the Casertic guards capture the criminal in such a critical case. He then bursts into laughter, only to suddenly return to frowning his features as he inquires if the captain understands what he's talking about. For clarity's sake, he tells him to bring Hans in, dead or alive. With this, Eren declares that he'll do his best, But in his heart, he admits how annoying it is that this incident involves the Lord. He makes his way out of the commander's office, keeping in mind that he's in danger of losing his head because of Hans. At this point, someone calls out to him, thus interrupting his thoughts, so he glances to his left to see who it is. It turns out to be the Casertic Outer Fortress Guard Unit 4, with Vermin telling him that they've set everything up. Afterwards, they all head towards District 7 under the rain, leaving Kale to proclaim that he doesn't think Hans will be in such a filthy place, no matter how crazy mages are supposed to be. His colleague then backs him up by pointing out that Hans also has a weak stomach and goes on about the team not wanting to wander around District 7 in the rain, seeing as it doesn't even have a proper toilet. In turn, Vermin suggests that they just pretend to search for the culprit and grab a beer somewhere else instead. Aaron becomes furious after hearing this, and glances back at his team as he tells them to shut their mouths. They instantly give him an affirmative response, leaving our hero to mutter that these medieval folks are idiots for talking about grabbing a beer when their heads are on the line. On the other hand, he can't even keep a straight face because of how filthy the environment is. Just then, he notices a hooded man sitting by the roadside and wastes no time calling out to him. With one hand on the hilt of his sword, he introduces his team as the Outer Fortress Guard and asks the stranger to take off his hood for a second. In turn, the man smiles, quipping that it's been a long time, and slowly peeling back his hood. He makes the mistake of abruptly calling the captain's name, and this jolts the hero. Before the bald stranger can finish his next sentence, Aaron sinks a life-changing punch into his cheek, and it's so forceful that it sends the poor man flying in the distance. After this, our hero just calls him a bastard while staring down with disgust. He goes on about how this stranger is the same person who got caught because he caused some problems, only for the man to nurse his face and deny the accusation. It's at this point that the captain asks him to identify himself, so the stranger opens up about only being a herbalist in that alley, adding that he was about to report a theft. In response, our hero quickly switches his demeanor to a more lighthearted one and rubs his chin as he quips that it's no wonder the man looked familiar. Still nursing his face, the herbalist cries out about not expecting such a thing from the captain. He goes on to ask why he got hit and why our hero caused the scene. But Aaron just stands with his arms intertwined, leaving the man to continue complaining about his crappy day. Apparently, all his herbs got stolen, so he wonders aloud why the thief would want a bunch of grim roots when they're so common that they can be found all over the hill behind the town. While the herbalist nurses his now swollen cheek, our hero realizes that grim root leaves are used to stop bleeding, and this becomes reason enough for him to inquire about the direction the herb thief went in. With the help of the herbalist, our hero finds his way into a much more secluded alley where a scrawny man is curled up and breathing heavily. He grips his bleeding arm and groans in pain, only for Aaron to call him Hans. At the mention of his name, his eyes shoot open from shock, but the captain is already close enough to see the culprit's face, so he asks him why he looks like that. He soon realizes the bleeding arm and lambasts hand for pathetically cutting off his arm when he always used to be the one who keeps things clean. Anyway, our hero cradles his sword on his shoulder and tells the culprit to come with him while he's still being nice. Now trembling, Hans glances back at his captain, thinking to himself that it's still not over. With this, he mutters indecipherable words under his breath and our hero becomes wary because drops of water begin to float afterwards. With each passing second, more water rises into the air until they begin to swirl above the mage's head. Aaron can only watch in awe as he wonders if the magic is this huge because it's raining. But the mage manages to call him his brother and reveals that he can't get caught yet. For this reason, he sends the twirling water down on our hero, but he somehow blocks the initial attack. This makes Hans tell himself that it's not over yet, and causes him to reinforce his spell by chanting some more. The captain finds it pretty annoying to be battling water magic on a rainy day, and after staring up at the spell for a while, he realizes that he has no choice but to fight back. For this reason, he takes a deep breath and takes off at an incredible speed, keeping in mind that he'll overpower the mage. Hans, on the other hand, looks as scared as can be, so much so that he keeps urging his spell to hurry up, and continues chanting in a bid to take out his opponent. Unfortunately, he's much too slow, so our hero arrives just beside him in mere seconds and screams that he should shut his mouth. Simultaneously, he slashes the mage's throat with his blade, seeing as there's an unknown power embedded in the words of mages. At the last minute, Hans calls Aaron his brother as tears pour down his cheeks, and this makes our hero only nick the side of his throat rather than cutting off the entire thing. As blood trickles down his neck, the mage goes on his knees and stares up at the captain. He then bursts into tears as he asks if he'll be spared. In turn, our hero mentions the rumor he heard about Hans signing a contract with a demon, and for confirmation, he squats to check the mage's chest. You see, whoever signs such a contract is bound to have a scar close to their heart, and when our hero lifts the mage's cloak, he discovers that it's as clean as a baby's bottom. He then wonders why the mage would do such a thing when he's not a demon's minion, only for Hans to flash him a wary smile and quip that it's going to be hard for the hero to understand if he tells him at the moment. He then adds that the captain will understand when he finds it someday. At this point, the voices of the other guards begin to close in on their location, leaving our hero in a state of confusion. He buries his face in his palm for a few seconds, all in a bid to stop himself from going crazy, and afterwards, he picks up the mage by his cloak and uncorks a mysterious vial. He goes on to pour the contents on the mage's bleeding hand, causing him to scream from the pain of impact. After this, Eren explains that it's a recovery option and adds that he should stop being ridiculous and come along. Our hero begins to uphurl some planks that were previously nailed down as he thinks to himself if losing an arm for stealing is punishment enough. He then kicks what's left of the planks out of the way as he realizes that it's not up to him to judge. This is because in medieval times, it's either you're innocent or you're getting hanged. All of his uphurling finally reveals a crawl space in the alleyway, so Eren tells the mage to get lost. In turn, Hans grips what's left of his arm and stops right in front of the hero. He refers to him as his brother once again, and this makes the captain punch him square in the face. He then stares down the mage, threatening him to get lost and to stop calling him his brother. Despite all of this, Hans still thanks him with tears in his eyes and calls him his brother one last time. Soon enough, he makes his way into the crawl space, leaving our hero to watch him go as he overhears his guards encroach on the alley because it's the only place left to search. Sunrise meets him in the alley and he tells the mage, who was already gone, not to call him his brother. You see, in this small fortress of the Casertic eastern frontier, Hans is now considered to have completely disappeared. The sun climbs higher into the sky as the day goes by, stealing glimpses at the tops of castles and extending its warmth to a lady's laundry down below. She smiles ever so brightly as she packs the newly dried clothes, only for a strange wind to blow, taking her undergarment alongside. All she can do is watch it fly away, and it continues to float over the city until our hero catches a glimpse of it. He's then left wondering who the owner could be. Unfortunately, in the medieval world where cleanliness, law, and ethics are utterly primitive, Eren is the guard captain. Infuriated, Vermin slams his fist against the table and shouts to the hearing of the other members of his team as he asks where a rat bastard like Hans would have disappeared to. Kale, on the other hand, visibly trembles as he wonders why they couldn't find the culprit even after searching all of the Casertic fortress. He then calls him a punk mage and admits that he's quite good. In response, Brig, the youngest guard in Unit 4, welcomes the possibility that Hans used magic to make a run for it, only for Pool, also known as Snake Eyes, to call him an idiot. He then tells the youngster that they wouldn't have arms if everything was possible using magic. Brig wonders if he's right, and it's at this point that Carter, also known as Sleepyhead, begs the rest of them to be quiet. In turn, they all stare at him helplessly as he laments about not even being able to have 5 hours of sleep for 3 days now, adding that he feels like he might die from tiredness. This doesn't bug Vermin, so he points out to Sleepyhead that he can't die just because he lacks sleep. Pool is quick to disagree, and intensely quips that Carter is sure to die. Everyone else easily agrees with him, and he reminds them that the guard even threw up the day before because he was so sleepy. As the unofficial second in command, Vermin announces that the search is over anyway, and tells his colleagues to rest well. With a smug look on his face, he sits back down, telling his nemesis, Kale, that he's still in second place. His colleague then points at him and asks why he's acting so proud. Meanwhile, our hero gets summoned by quite the dreaded official. The man confirms that his name is Eren of the Casertic Fortress Guard Unit 4 and proceeds to light his cigar using a candle. Afterwards, he takes a big puff, quips that it's nice to meet our hero, and simply introduces himself as William. Of course, the captain has heard of Constable William before, seeing as he's someone who can cut his neck with just a word, or even send him to the underground prison for the rest of his life. He recognizes him as the biggest name when it comes to Casertic's guards. The constable goes on to mention how close he heard Eren was to the culprit that got away, and takes another puff of his cigar as he points out that our hero continued to patrol the last area remaining in District 7 all by himself. He then stands to his full height just to tower over the captain and questions him about failing to discover anything in his search. While suspecting that Eren let the mage go, he points out that the area he searched just so happens to be one where internal guards can't look into. In turn, our hero stares at him with his eyes screaming that there's no evidence to back up his suspicion, but his mouth declares that there's nothing else in the district but poop. They come to a stalemate for a few seconds, so William diverts his attention to Manuel, the commander of the external guard. Upon hearing his name, the tube on his head practically flies off because of how scared he gets. The constable goes on to tell him that the cigars he gave him really taste well, and takes one more puff as he wonders if the commander managed to afford such an expensive item with such a small salary. In turn, Mr. Manuel can't bring himself to stop stuttering as he explains that he got the cigar as a gift from a very distant relative. William simply agrees, but also hopes that the commander didn't steal or embezzle. In turn, Manuel looks visibly sick to his stomach and claims that he did no such thing. With this, the big boss calls for their attention and declares that anyone in the castle who commits a crime, or helps others do so, will definitely die in his hands. Simultaneously, he puts off his cigar on Eren's baldric, stares down at him intimidatingly, and tells him to keep what he said in mind. Afterwards, our hero simply brushes off the ashes and pastes a fake smile on his face as he promises to do just that. It's already dusk before William lets the captain go, with the daybirds migrating to their sleeping nests, and the warm light of the sun trickling down. Vermin and Kale then escort our hero to the castle gates and bid him a safe journey home. In turn, he plainly tells them okay. As he continues his journey, he rubs the back of his neck, cursing the Middle Ages for not having any sense of human rights and trying to wrap his head around how long the investigation lasted. At this point, Hans comes to his mind, and he acknowledges that the mage somehow escaped without getting caught. His thoughts then get interrupted when someone screams from inside an inn nearby, the Laughing Rabbit inn to be exact. Apparently, some punk with a face tattoo is busy trifling with the owner just because she's a lady. She asks him what he's doing, but he only points out that she's so pretty and that it would be a shame for them to just leave like that. The owner's name is Henna and she would very much like for the punk to let go of her hand, so she yells at him to do so and furrows her brows to show how serious she is. Just then, another man named Dylan has his back turned as he quips that he instructed the punk to treat Henna like a gentleman would. They both turn their attention to this Dylan, so he returns the favor as he twirls in his seat. He then announces that the lady is misunderstanding their intentions. He goes on about how they haven't been to the village in a long time and are looking for some local friends. He then winks as he adds that it would be preferred if the friendship is one that would let them share a bed all night. This makes the rest of his gang burst into laughter, but Henna angrily retrieves her hand from the punk. As she nurses her wrist, she exhales loudly and tells them that they look like mercenaries from another country and adds that there'll be a really difficult situation if they continue acting like this. Most of the mercenaries turn their attention to her at this point, but it doesn't stop her from telling them to stop before they do something they'll regret. This statement really pisses Dylan off, so he slams his open palm against the bar table, stands to his feet, and asks her what'll happen if they don't want to stop. To make things worse, he walks up to an already trembling Henna and asks her what she's going to do about it. He then dips a finger into the top of her dress as he asks if she thinks a guard is going to show up and save her, adding that there's no way guards will come to take care of such an isolated shabby inn. As though summoned, our hero bends his head as he walks through the entrance. Hannah's face lights up upon seeing him, and the same goes for 3 elderly regulars of the bar. They all excitedly call out the captain's name, but his face remains stoic as he literally looks down on the mercenaries. The inn owner wastes no time running to his side, leaving the opposition no choice but to get on their feet in a feeble attempt to intimidate our hero with their numbers. Of course, it doesn't work, seeing as Aaron doesn't even pay them any mind. Instead, he glances back at Henna and asks her for 10 days of free lodging in exchange for taking care of these guys. In turn, she offers only 5, adding that it's less than the last time they had the exchange, not to mention the fact that it's supposed to be his job because he's a guard. As a clawback, he drops his offer to 9 days, pointing out that he is clocked out as captain already. For this reason, Henna quips that 6 days is the best she can do. Meanwhile, Dylan and his mercenary buddies are lost in the conversation. It gets to the point where Dylan gets infuriated and asks how our hero has the audacity to ignore them. With this, the tattooed punk from earlier calls Aaron a devilish bastard and launches towards him with a balled fist and limbs full of vigor. In turn, our hero simply tells Henna that he wants 8 days, leaving his so-called opponent to yell as he asks him where he's looking. It literally takes the captain nothing to stretch out his hand and cover the punk's face completely, telling him that he has a foul medieval talking habit. Still gripping his face, our hero drops his offer of 6 days of free lodging and dinner for the night, and Henna, who has been peeking from behind him, gets asked if she'll take the deal. In turn, she flashes him a thumbs up in agreement even though she doesn't know what a deal means. After this, Aaron begins to apply pressure to this punk's head, making him cry out in pain. And soon enough, our hero flings him past Dylan and into the wall behind him. He then poses like a lion about to make jest of rats, announcing that it's time to educate these horrible medieval people. The elderly regulars continue to chug their beers as they spy on the situation from above their mugs, and the moment they notice that Dylan is sweating buckets, they slam the mugs on the table and burst into laughter. Our hero then punches the teeth out of Dylan's mouth as he points out that there are no bad medieval people, and kicks the soul out of his fellow mercenary as he adds that there are only people who need to be beaten up more. For good measure, he gathers proper momentum and sinks yet another punch straight into Dylan's face, zing that once each of them takes a hit, they'll become nicer. The elderly regulars lose their minds from excitement, with one of them standing and yelling that he has been waiting for the day these thugs will come to the Laughing Rabbit. The other elder then yells at Henna to bring them 1 more cup of beer each. You see, the main reason why they became customers of the Laughing Rabbit is because there's a human monster living there. Aaron, the greatest human cleaner in all of Kasserdik and the rogue captain of the guards. These men continue to cheer on the object of their admiration, telling him to kill the mercenary currently taking a beating and asking him to hit the poor punk 1 more time. Amidst the beatdown, our hero glances in their direction with the most unimpressed expression he can muster and wonders if he should teach them a lesson someday too. On the other hand, Dylan slowly tries to peel out his axe from the holster in his back, only for Aaron to call out to him. The mercenary then turns his attention to the monster before him. In turn, our hero pulls him further off the ground and inquires if he really wants to take out his axe. This makes Dylan raise both hands in denial as he laughs with incomplete teeth. Just like that, the captain successfully clocked off and sent all the mercenaries running. He then retires to his room for the night and sinks into his bed soon enough, covering his eyes with his arm. Further into the night, he begins to dream about the time X found him and named him Aaron, only for the dream to take a more drastic turn as he sees her back on the battlefield, battered and bruised. She even tells him to run away and never look back, adding that he must live on. With this, he jolts himself awake and pulls out his sword from beneath his pillow. It's barely the break of dawn at this point, but our hero is already awake and drenched in sweat. G just stares at his bladder and lets tears roll down his cheeks. While the sun peeks out from atop the castle, Aaron swings his sword in the space behind the inn. He then lifts the blade to his eye level, keeping in mind that it's been 6 years already since he fell into this wretched world. Our hero is left to wonder how long he'll be able to continue with his routine, but gets interrupted by a strange man in full regalia. The man points out that the captain's sword has no frills and adds that he never knew there was a skilled man in the borders of Casertic. After mentioning how surprising he finds it, he applauds Aaron. In turn, he wipes the sweat off his face and checks out its stranger. The first thing he notices is the symbol of the Fenner family on the man's armor and a spiral rapier on his hip. This is enough to let X know that the stranger before him is in fact a knight. Knights as they're known in this world are a group that handles auras and fights against demons, not to mention the fact that they're blessed with the ability to surpass human limits. They're basically the sword of humanity. Knowing all of this, Aaron continues to check out the man before him, keeping in mind that he must be a knight from a faraway bolt fortress of Hezbollah from the Fenner family. He then tightens his grip around his sword as he wonders why someone like that would come all the way to Casertic and welcomes the possibility of him being sent by the Empire. In response, the knight flashes him a warm smile and announces that he has nothing to be wary of, seeing as he just got excited at our hero's sword skills without realizing it. Just as he's questioning Aaron about whether or not he belongs to a knight order, someone yells out his name, calling him Ben. Both men turn their attention to the direction of the voice, only to find out that it's a blonde-haired lady, angry at the knight for leaving her alone despite being her designated escort. She's none other than Vivian Fulpitz, only daughter of the Casertic Lord's family. At this point, she gasps audibly as she realizes that both men were in the middle of a conversation, and apologizes for the interruption. In turn, Aaron wastes no time taking a knee and introducing himself as a member of the Casertic Outer Fortress Unit Guard Unit 4. He then bows even deeper as he extends his greeting to Miss Vivian of Casertic. In turn, she guards her lips as she laughs softly and expresses how nice it is to meet the captain. She goes on to extend her sincere apologies for the trouble her undergarments caused him. Apparently, her father went on to make a fuss even though she said it was nothing. With his head still bowed, our hero tells her that it's fine. But in his mind, he can't stop wondering why Lady Vivian is being escorted by a knight from the Bolt Fortress. She just pushes Sir Ben along as she announces that they'll be on their way since the knight seems to have interrupted our hero's training. Her innocent smiles are followed up with more encouragement to make the captain continue to work hard for the security of the Casertic fortress. At this point, all the knight can do is steal a glance at Aaron, and despite being told that he's a guard, he still feels like he's a knight. In turn, the captain stays put with both hands behind his back up until the princess is well out of sight. He then scratches his hair as he acknowledges that something fishy is going on, but since it's not his business, he simply decides to go back to work. Unfortunately, he's met with a loud series of screams from Commander Manuel and a direct command to appear before him. Our hero is instantly worried, so much so that it's evident in his features. As sweat trickles down his face, he's left wondering what happened. Sadly, in this medieval era, there are no turn signals. Aaron gets sent to the inner fortress for disciplinary action, and takes a deep breath as he reaches the door to the office. Right then, he has flashes of his recent past, with the commander yelling as he called him a bastard and asked if he has lost his mind. Mr. Manuel had also reminded the captain that he warned him to be careful about who he hit and drilled him about turning the mercenaries hired by the fortress into walking corpses. For this reason, the commander sent him to go face the administrative board and solve the problem himself. While he's still sweating buckets in front of the office, he refuses to believe that those bullies from the inn are mercenaries hired by the inner fortress, not to mention that they were put onto the official charge. He finally gathers enough courage to knock and the official yells for him to come in. The moment our hero steps in, he can see the obvious annoyance on Nova's face, so he quietly asks if she was looking for him. In turn, she stops writing and begins to stew in her anger as she wonders why Aaron is in her office once again. Her malicious intent gets so terrible that she subconsciously crumples the document she was working on and drills our hero about being the type of guard that causes trouble all the time. To make things worse, she urges him to quit his job if he feels like it doesn't suit him and stares at him in irritation as she asks him to stop making other people's jobs so difficult. The captain expected all of this from the administrative officer of the Casertic castle, but thinks of her as the best officer with a babbling spirit. However, he came with a plan this time. You see, he had asked Kale, who is the only eligible bachelor in Unit 4, to instruct him on how to win a woman's favor. He remembers the first step being to keep a soft smile around his mouth, so he tries to replicate this as much as he can. It turns out terribly, but he still calls out Nova's name, so instead of being mesmerized, the administrative officer is quite puzzled. Kale's second step involves giving the woman sweet specific compliments, praises that could make even a whale dance. In a failed attempt to replicate this, he puts up a terrible smile and tells Nova that her plump hair looks just like a perfectly ripened orange. Sadly, he adds that it makes him want to taste it immediately. The lady's eyes roll into the back of her head as almost loses her mind from annoyance. She asks herself if our hero is going insane, and ultimately takes deep breaths to regain composure. After this, she brushes his behavior aside and admits that dealing with him gives her a headache. Sadly, Eren is dense enough to take this as a success of his ability to charm a lady. In turn, Nova informs him that the mercenaries he knocked out at the inn were originally meant to be sent to Bolt Fortress, and the coding simply throws his hands in the air as he proclaims that the X were more like piles of dung than they were mercenaries. He then reveals that even if they were sent to the fortress the way they are, they would still serve their purpose. Nova's annoyance somehow finds its way up the meter once again and she screams at our hero to shut his mouth. He gives an affirmative response in no time, leaving her to tell him that he'll have to fill in for the mercenaries now that it has come to this, adding that he has no choice in the matter. She promises to provide compensation and then makes it clear that it's Eren's mess to clean up. In turn, he just scratches his chin and agrees, only wanting to know what is actually going on. Later on, our hero joins a long queue of mercenaries and guards to escort a few carriages. The nightlights are the only thing aiding their vision, seeing as the sun is slowly going to sleep. At this point, the captain can't stop asking himself why there are so many people just for an escort carriage, and his hand meets his chin as he goes deeper into thought. He realizes that most of the escorts seem to be other mercenaries and that it looks like they're gearing up either for battle or for something big. The captain is left asking himself why he doesn't feel good about any of it, so he turns to inquire from the mercenary behind him about who will ride the carriage. He soon notices that it's Dylan and refers to him as the weasel from Bafikar. In turn, the young man lifts his hands to guard himself, with his face fully swollen and his tooth still missing. He then quickly switches to the offensive, yelling at our hero and calling him a monster. For some reason, Dylan wants him to know that he's stronger than he looks, only for Eren to remind him that all of his mercenary friends are still on the brink of death. He then wonders if Delinquent has more resilience than he looks, or maybe he got hit less than the others. After hearing this, Dylan humbles himself and grants the hero permission to call him a weasel. One of the others then points out that the sun has already set and then throws the question of whether or not they'll camp on the first day into the crowd. In response, another mercenary tells him that they'll be staying in a small village nearby. The captain instantly becomes cautious upon hearing this and remains so until they arrive at Noctville village on the outskirts of Kasurtik. For some reason, the guards return with a report of the entire village being empty, thus making the others wonder if all the indigenes ran away together. In turn, another mercenary points out that the village did not have a bad harvest year, only for his colleague to ask if it was the work of demons and the likes. The other mercenary is quick to shun him for saying something like that, but Dylan, who is listening to both of them, gets distracted when he sees our hero walking away. He chases him down in a bid to find out where he's headed, and when he doesn't get a response, he offers to follow Eren to wherever it is. At this point, there's a strange blonde lady watching them from the shadows. As the crows fly off of lifeless trees above, Dylan continues to tail Eren below, bombarding him with questions about where he's going to and whether or not there's something going on in such a small village. Although our hero remains quiet, the youngster goes on to ask where all the village people are. Just then, the captain has memories of his time as a knight when he gave a book to one of the younger boys in this very village. The boy had accepted it wholeheartedly and even hugged the book as he thanked our hero. He then told him to never forget to pay him a visit whenever he came by their village. Back to the present, Eren finally stops in his tracks, leaving Dylan to shoot him questioning looks as he lightly bumps into him. The young mercenary then realizes that he's stepping in a pool of blood and begins to hop around in it, hopelessly trying not to step in any more of it. The captain wastes no time telling him not to look up, but Dylan's curiosity gets the better of him. A simple glance reveals a bunch of emaciated corpses tied to crosses from the beginning of the street to the end, with their blood dripping onto the floor. The young missionary has his jaw dropped by the sight, but our hero's features remain as stoic as ever. Well, until the strange lady from earlier calls out to him. His eyes instantly shoot open and his head twirls in the direction of her voice. Both and Dylan give her their attention as she asks what the captain is doing in Noctville, only for him to shoot her the same question almost immediately. For some reason, this strange lady turns out to be Vivian Fulpitz. Dinner is being served to the other mercenaries present, but Dylan and Eren just sit quietly by a small fire of their own making. The others go on about this being the first time they've ever seen this much meat in one stew, and some others even threaten that they would have deserted had the food been terrible too. Meanwhile, Dylan can't wrap his head around why these men are so laid back, not to mention how they can still eat after seeing those drained corpses. Just as he announces that he has no idea who would do something so crazy, John, commander of the convoy, literally walks into their conversation, explaining that it was a sacrifice. He clarifies that what they found is a kind of ritual where humans are offered to demons. Mr. John then takes a seat beside them and asks if they'll have a sip of wine since they haven't eaten anything. Our hero is quick to turn him down, seeing as alcohol dulls his senses, but Dylas laughs and declares that he never turns down a drink. For this reason, Eren threatens to kill him if he throws up again. It's at this point that Commander John officially introduces himself and then asks if the other two are mercenaries. Our hero reveals that he's only doing part-time work, and as off-brand as that sounds, the commander brushes it away, advising them to make sure to eat well and rest whenever they can. Apparently, he feels the journey might be tougher than they expected. Just then, one of the mercenaries yells for everyone to look in a certain direction, and upon closer inspection, he happens to be referring to the princess. Commander John quips that she's called the Flower of the East, only for Dylan to look at her dreamily and admit that she's really beautiful. In turn, the commander reveals that he always knew that the mission wasn't an ordinary escort mission but never expected Lady Caserdic and her knight to be the ones in the carriage. This whole time, our hero stays quiet as he reminisces on the near past when Lady Vivian suddenly popped up at the scene where the corpses were strung up. He had asked why she was there and the lady laughed and claimed that she was just going for a little outing. Apparently, she found it suffocating to stay inside the castle all the time and is heading to the Bolt Fortress per her father's suggestion. Eren had tried to press her for more information, especially trying to know if it was Lord Caserdic that approved it. But Sir Ben softly grabbed her shoulder to stop her and added that knowing too much comes with great responsibility. While Princess Vivian looked up at him, he smiled sinisterly and told our hero to only know what fits his position as a captain of the guards. Back to the present, our hero has his hands and legs intertwined with each other as he mulls everything over. This makes Commander John point out that he seems oddly calm and ask him if he doesn't feel scared about a demon suddenly appearing. Eren stays quiet for a while, and then reminds the commander that they have a knight on their side. Seeing as they're the Empire's elite force, trained solely to fight off demons, he doesn't see the need for others to worry. As for himself, our hero reaches for his blade and points out that as long as he has it, he has always made his way out with even the slimmest chances of survival. He then averts his gaze, quipping that it's quite unfortunate. Commander John asks if that is so, and when he gets no response, he wishes him luck. Later on, our hero heads back to his quarters where he picks up a red book. He stares at it intently and remembers when he asked Horn if the book was fun, and the boy had a smile on his face as he gave an affirmative response. Eren fondly realizes that it has been ages since they last saw each other, and while he wonders how tall Horn must have grown to be, another presence joins him in the room. This person touches the captain's shoulder and gets a reflexive elbow to the face for his troubles. After this, our hero realizes that the man looks weird as he lays with barely any blood gushing out of the head wound. To make things worse, his eyes seem to be sewn shut and he can't even make any coherent sentences. In no time, this mindless creature charges towards Eren, leaving him no choice but to cut him down. Afterwards, he ruffles his hair as he wonders if he just killed a zombie, not to mention where it came from. At this point, the captain hears somebody screaming and it turns out to be Dylan fighting off his own zombie. The young mercenary screams at it to get away from him and then cuts it down using 2 weapons at a time. He successfully beheads it but doesn't seem too thrilled about that fact. In no time, he tracks Eren down only to see that he has taken down yet another of these monsters. Dylan then grabs onto the captain's leg, wailing as he asks where he's going to at this ungodly hour, and why he's leaving him behind. In turn, our hero tells him to stop freaking out and inquires about the location of everyone else. This worsens the wailing of the young mercenary, and he screams that they're completely screwed. As it turns out, all the other mercenaries and soldiers are all asleep and won't wake up, almost as if they've been put under a spell. Upon hearing this, our hero becomes more cautious, only for his eyes to shoot open as he wonders why he and Dylan are not sleeping if it's in fact magic. He then realizes that the stew is drugged and that their goal is to capture someone alive, seeing as they could have made it poison rather than a sleeping agent. While the captain concludes that Lady Vivian is probably the target, Dylan begins to pull on his shirt to draw his attention to the problem approaching them, a problem consisting of multiple zombies. They shriek as they trudge their way to attack, but none of it phases Eren. In fact, he simply pushes the young mercenary back and announces that he'll warm up with these slow zombies before the real game starts. With this, he takes a deep breath, steadies his blade and begins to hack away at these monsters like they were the ones they killed the love of his life. He continues to cut them down mindlessly until he gets to a point where he asks himself if he has woken up. He then curses as he points out that he's referring to a wake-up call for army brats. After this, he goes back to cutting down as many as his blade can touch, and soon enough, he stands amidst a sprawl of corpses as the rain pours down. Our hero goes on row wipe their blood off his face, only to notice that there's one more zombie that's still moving. Surprise falls upon him as he realizes who it is, and in turn, Horn speaks incoherently as he trudges himself towards Eren. He then admits that the boy has grown a bit taller and lifts his sword above his head to cut him down. 2 years ago, our hero was being chased down, so he hid away in a small village. This was where he met Horn, and the youngster would sometimes track him down to the forest, referring to him as Mr. Knight. That day, Eren just smiled back and asked who the kid was referring to, only for Horn to tell him that he saw it in a book that knights are strong and cool. The youngster was the son of a farmer, but he never let it stop his love for books. He went to show our hero the picture of a knight in the book he was reading and told him he was the strongest and coolest person he knew. In turn, Aaron ruffled his hair, teasing him about liking to talk nonsense. The boy tried to get him to stop, but our hero didn't listen. He just kept laughing. He really liked the youngster, but now he's faced with the decision to cut him down. This is the same boy whom he tracked down from time to time, even after settling in Casertic Fortress. The same boy was so full of life when our hero had told him about the numerous books he could find in the city library. He went a step further and explained that there were librarians who were buried between books all day long. This was practically the dream for Horn, so he told Aaron that he wanted to become a librarian so that he too would be buried between books all day. In response, the hero agreed that it would be a good fit for the kid, seeing as he was already a bookworm. The captain finally brings down his blade as he recalls the rumor that demons feed on fear. Sadly, he still can't bring himself to strike Horn, so just the enormous wind from his strike blows past the boy. Aaron begins to sweat nervously as he remembers a time when the kid came to him with a bruise on his cheek. He had asked him what happened, so Horn explained that he got a bit of a beating from his father because he told him that he wanted to become a librarian. He soon burst into tears, and as he struggled to wipe them, he revealed that his father believed that the son of a farmer could only become a farmer. The hero can still see that crying boy in the Horn of today. And despite the fact that demons actually feed in despair, he casts aside his blade and pulls the youngster in for a hug. As the rain continues to pour, the only thing Aaron tells the growling kid is that he's not a knight. He increased the pressure from the hug, squeezing Horn tighter with each passing second until the kid loses consciousness. He then quips that he's only a fortress guard captain. The rain refuses to take a break, and while silhouettes of other zombies pull in closer to our hero, he's busy laying Horn's corpse down gently. Just then, Dylan and his incomplete teeth call out for the captain, yelling that he woke up all the other mercenaries who were sleeping around. With this, he instructs them to stab and beat up whatever zombies are left, adding that they should wipe all of them out. In turn, they all charge into the zombie swarm with weapons raised, while Aaron stays beside Horn. Soon enough, the kid grovel in a low tone, too weak to do anything else, so our hero closes his eyes with his palm and tells the youngster to just rest in peace. All he hopes for is that nothing more will happen after death. While the mercenaries are taking out the remaining zombies, they overhear an explosion from a building nearby. The bright yellow light draws their attention to it, and they realize that the building is the same one Lady Vivian is staying in. None of this is Aaron's business, but he grips his sword and approaches the burning house with the intention of taking out the demon-kin as revenge for Horn. Meanwhile, said demon-kin slashed the throat of yet another guard, having stabbed Sir Ben in the arm with a short sword. The guard's body drops to the ground and the knight does what he can to slow the bleeding in his arm. He then announces that the only reason why they were secretly heading to Bolt Fortress was because they heard rumors that someone at the Casertic Fortress was threatening Lady Vivian's life. The knight goes on to pull out the blade as he acknowledges that the rumors were true. Unfortunately, he never expected the demon-kin to target such a secret procession. But now, even as the princess sleeps right behind him, Sir Ben stands his ground. He takes heavy breaths, but still declares that holding a sword in defense of the lady is the happiness and romance of a knight. He then diverts his gaze to the demon-kin, who has one of his hands red and disfigured with multiple sleeping eyes. The knight doesn't care who his opponent is, and to prove it, he calls the demon-kin a disgusting fellow and boldly asks him to step back immediately. In turn, said demon-kin smirks and quips that the knight is the yapping type, adding that even if he tries to buy himself time with all the talking, his wounds still won't heal quick enough. This is because the dagger he was stabbed with was previously coated with vicious poison, not to mention the part about him also eating the stew. For this reason, he's certain that his opponent's mind must be foggy. At this point, the demon-kin sits atop the exploded part of the building, and a knight who can barely stay standing points his blade towards him. He goes on to ask Sir Ben if he believes he stands a chance, and the knight wastes no time giving an affirmative response, adding that the demon-kin's actions are simply vile to him. To make things worse, Ben blames this on his ugly face, and all the eyes on the demon-kin's hand come awake as he throws curses at the knight. He warns Sir Ben to be careful with his words and launches himself from the top of the building simultaneously. Upon landing, the ground beneath his feet shatters, causing the knight to stagger a few steps back. He stares at his blade after this and wonders if he's only using half of his full skill level, seeing as is barely noticeable. Just then, he realizes that his opponent is stretching his arm for yet another attack and keeps in mind that the demonic erosion is only taking place on that arm. For this reason, he ducks and dodges the attack, aiming for the eroded arm while he's at it. Right on cue, the knight stabs his opponent straight in the left chest, telling himself that there's still a chance to win. Barely any blood escapes from the injury before the demon-kin grabs Sir Ben by the neck and begins to strangle him. He then lifts his prey off the ground and he asks if the knight really thought he would die if he got stabbed in a part of his body that hasn't transformed yet. Sadly, Ben is gasping for air, so he doesn't respond. His predator gets more pissed with each passing moment, and the muscles around his face begin to thicken to prove it. He then yells that he'll kill the knight and goes on to squeeze his neck even tighter. At this point, he perks up at the sight of someone behind the demon-kin, only for our hero to declare that he came to get vengeance for Horn. He wastes no time swinging his blade and aiming it at the demon-kin's head. He then tells the abnormality to take the information in whatever way he likes. Having slashed the head of his opponent, our hero watches as the demonkin screams in pain and instantly turns around for a counterattack. He asks for the identity of the captain but doesn't wait to hear his answer before slamming him with his demonkin eroded arm. In turn, Eren puts all his weight behind his blade as he uses it to block this attack. Sadly, Kai is not enough to stop him from flying into the distance and slamming into the wall. This gives his opponent enough time to regenerate the cells in his head, with red essence exuding from him while he's at it. He grabs his half-forged head as he wonders how the hero hurt him so much. The demonkin is particularly angry because Eren isn't even a knight, but managed to make him waste his precious blood. He quickly glances at the sleeping princess, thinking to himself that they need to quickly hand her over before they run out of blood offered as sacrifice. At this point, our hero brings himself back to his feet and yells once again that he's here to avenge Horn, who has been turned into a zombie. He charges towards the demonkin after this and jumps off the ground just when he gets close enough. This is all in a bid to use gravity to his advantage, and both contenders jam their weapons against each other in an unholy force. The captain manages to get a hit in, but gets slammed into the wall once again. The demonkin then heals himself up, and Eren stands up on the opposite side of the room, promising to continue to cut the abnormality down no matter how many times he heals himself. This infuriates him so much, but all he can do is throw curses at our hero. Just then, the abnormality stops in his tracks, and realizes that the demonkin in his arm has begun to suck his own blood for sustenance. At this rate, he's bound to be consumed. This is when Eren begins to get back up and mock his opponent for being unable to take a hit or two. He then calls him a weakling point blank. The demonkin loses his mind upon hearing this, and grits his teeth as black essence flows out of every crevice in his body. This doesn't stop our hero from launching another strike, but this time, his opponent catches the blade mid-air. He then yells at the captain, wanting to know why his will to go this far for Horn. The demonkin continues to put up a front, but he can't help but wonder where Eren's strength is coming from if he's not even a knight. While our hero continues to push back his opponent with his blade, his sixth sense picks up another presence behind him. For this reason, he quickly lets go of the demonkin-possessed man and turns around to block an incoming attack. It turns out to be Commander John, but his eyes are much redder than before as he quips that Eren is not just big for nothing. In turn, our hero keeps his blade pressed against that of his opponent as he reveals that he has been wondering when the commander would crawl out. In turn, John acknowledges that the captain is also smart and screams that he looks like a bear. Simultaneously, he switches his stance and strikes Eren once again, adding that he's a fox on the inside. Multiple strikes follow after this one and it becomes a full-on clash of blades, with the captain pointing out that he always suspected John because he suddenly appeared, only for them to discover that the villagers had been sacrificed. Sparks fly as their blades scrape against each other, leaving the demonkin to attempt to heal himself while they go at it. Unfortunately, the demon whispers that it's too late, and the moment it adds that the host's body is no longer needed, it begins to consume much more than just his hand. The man screams as he begs the demon to wait and even promises to offer it more blood immediately, but none of this stops him from being consumed. Just then, the abnormality whispers that it has found a much more delicious-looking body. As for the battle ensuing right behind him, Commander John successfully cuts our hero's blade in two, leaving him to wonder if the cheap blade got dull during the fight with the demonkin. At this point, his opponent concludes that it's over and launches in with his own blade as he jostles at our hero to die. This is practically pointless because Eren simply uses the hilt of his blade to sink an unthinkable punch into the commander's face. This pushes him back instantly and is escorted by blood leaking out of his face and him cussing out the captain. Soon enough, the commander drops to his knees and falls into a pool of his own blood as he admits that he didn't put a guy like Eren into his calculations. To make things worse, our hero comes face to face with the full-blown demonum's quips that in the end, the man got completely devoured by the abnormality. This new enemy seems like an intertwining of pale purple vines, with a huge eye made up of tiny ones at the center of his chest and only a mouth gracing his face. The beast then calls Eren a pitiful creature and asks him what he'll do, seeing as he'll soon be consumed by a great demon. In turn, our hero just glares at him and drops his broken blade as he gets told that he now lacks the strength to even swing a sword, not to mention the fact that he's not even a knight. None of the demon's words stop the captain from launching himself headfirst at the beast. He then jumps onto the body of his opponent as he bellows that there's nothing our hero can possibly do. To prove him wrong, he grabs onto the corners of the demon's chest, announces that he can take care of its disgusting eyes, and proceeds to expose his teeth. Just as he declares that he can tear off the eyes, he uses his teeth to pull on one of the eyes until he parts ways with the demon's body. The opponent simply smiles and quips that Eren is impressive, but after this, our hero finds himself in the past. A situation where Galgai, the gladiator, and Wai, the gambler, are quarreling over lost funds. Apparently, the latter lost the former's money and got lifted off the ground for his troubles. Wai tried to talk his way out of the situation by playing on Galgai's trust for his comrades, but it didn't work in the slightest. This made Avery the mage burst into laughter, and in this trance, the other members of our hero's previous mercenary group were present, including the redhead he once loved, also known as their deputy commander. She calmly told Y to return the money, but he ended up eating one of Galgai's punches before he could do so. Suddenly, the trance shifts into a memory of Aaron's boss grabbing his shoulder after getting stabbed in the back with various weapons. He then tells the captain not to forget to find a way to survive at all costs. Our hero finds himself sighted amidst the corpses of all his previous crewmates, leaving the demon, who feeds on despair, to admit that he's truly delicious. That marks the end of this episode for now. I picked up this series on a whim after noticing the absolutely badass design of the MC, and I hope you enjoyed the story so far, because we've already caught up with all the currently released chapters. If you're looking forward to more, make sure to show your love to this video by liking and subscribing, as it really helps with the reach. If the video does well, I'll be sure to make a second part when more chapters are released. Until next time.